Uh, good evening or good morning, everyone, depending on where in the world you're listening. Um, I'm very pleased and privileged to bring you our cross-border M&A HKCBA webinar. And for the next hour, we're going to be discussing fascinating topics regarding cross-border M&A, how essentially how 2020 has treated us, and how is the forecast looking for 2021. First of all, I would like to thank our sponsors, Macmillan, Tanner DeWitt, Hong Kong, Economic Trade Office, which is abbreviation HKETO, and I'd like to also introduce our umbrella organization, the HKCBA. And finally, encourage people to join and follow us as we produce numerous knowledge and networking opportunities throughout the year. Some of the events that we're working on for the upcoming months are the third installment of our real estate series scheduled for January 18th, dealing with green tech and sustainable buildings, and another webinar toward the end of February dealing with artificial intelligence. If you would like to get involved or suggest other event topics, please do not hesitate to reach out to HKCBA Montreal. And with that, I'd like to introduce Emily Moe of the HKETO, who will provide us with a short speech and then play a 2-minute video on the Asian Financial Forum and Hong Kong. So over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Drew. Good morning, everyone, and good evening to those in Hong Kong. It's my pleasure to join you today. In the past year, when COVID haunted the world, the M&A activities, however, in Hong Kong continue to be very active. One major deal is Couche-Tard's acquisition of the Circle K chain in Hong Kong, which provides the Canadian company a platform to launch its regional growth in Asia. Hong Kong is also an excellent platform for exchanges between professionals in the financial industry, like all of you here today. And I'd like to invite you to join the coming Asian Financial Forum, AFF, of Hong Kong. The event will be virtually held on the 18th and 19th of January next year, where you will be able to connect with global thought leaders and experts in the financial industry. AFF is Asia's premier platform for global leaders in government, finance, and business to exchange insights and investment opportunities. For example, more than 3,500 C-suite financial and business leaders gather at the AFF 2020 for thought leadership, business networking, and matching. Before we hear our seasoned panels sharing on the outlook for the cross-border transaction between Hong Kong and North America today, I would like to show you a short video about the AFF, and I would like to invite you to another webinar on the AFF, which will be hosted by the Hong Kong TDC tomorrow. Enjoy and thank you.
Okay, well, apologize there. We had some technical difficulties with the sound. I can assure you that I've attended every AFF since 2012, and it's actually a very, very noisy event and highly entertaining and very much worth attending. But Emily, do you have any comments perhaps you'd like to share? Just following up with the video.
No, yeah, no problem. I can share, of course, the link of the video with Drew, so that Hong Kong TDC can share with the attendees today. And just a little bit of advertisement, because tomorrow the Hong Kong Trade Development Council will also organize a specific webinar on the AFF. I will also provide the registration link. If you feel comfortable, please help share the link with the attendees today, so that they can also sign up specifically to know more about the AFF tomorrow.
Okay, thanks so much, Emily.
Thanks,
and again, just a final shout out for the AFF. It's again, I've attended in the past with our Canadian contingent here, Raj and Eric, our panelists, whom we'll meet in just a moment. And again, I can assure you, it's unparalleled in terms of international networking. We saw some of the speakers that passed by in the video too: Ben Bernanke, Janet Yellen, who's about to come back into government once again. So I encourage everyone to please register and attend. And speaking of our distinguished and fascinating panelists, it's a true privilege to be on this webinar with every single one of them. I'd like to actually introduce them, but then have them provide a brief introduction of themselves, their practice, perhaps even mention what links you to Hong Kong. And I'll start in alphabetical order. So first is Eric Cardinal of Velocity Trade.
Thank you, Drew. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We've got people from all over the world. My name is Eric Cardinal. My principal role is as Senior Director of Velocity Trade, as Drew just mentioned. Velocity is a registered broker-dealer present in 7 countries now, so it's an international firm. And my role at Velocity is that I'm responsible for the corporate advisory practice, therefore the M&A mandates that come in. I'm based in Montreal, Canada, but travel very much so. Velocity is also, as I said, registered broker-dealer, so we trade on the open market, registered in all countries where we are present. We do a lot of FX strategies, for example. So for international transactions, we help with the scheduling of payments in international currencies. I'm a frequent visitor to Asia ever since 2016, when I joined Drew in a firm that we were heading up together. Headed out to Asia for capital raising mandates, divestitures, some sell-side mandates, especially in the fields of tech, fintech, food and beverage, and distribution. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you, Eric. And next up is Raj Dewan with Macmillan.
Good morning, everyone. Good evening. My name is Raj Dewan. I'm a partner with Macmillan. Macmillan, for those of you who don't know, is actually the only Canadian law firm with an office in Hong Kong. Our firm has a long-standing history and investment in Hong Kong, having our office there for over 10 years. Our Hong Kong office is really our hub for cross-border transactional work between Canada and Asia, inclusive of Hong Kong, Singapore, mainland China, Southeast Asia. My practice is largely focused on capital markets, working with Canadian companies that are looking to go to Asia and looking at investment opportunities, inbound and opportunities originating from Asia into Canada. So Hong Kong has and will continue to be a very important part of our business strategy and our firm's business law practice. And I welcome the opportunity to be part of this panel this morning.
Okay, thanks very much, Raj. Our next speaker is Chris Tran. So over to you, Chris.
Firstly, thank you very much, Drew, for having me on this panel. My name is Chris Tran. I'm the head of Northridge Partners for Southeast Asia. Based in Singapore, we work with Southeast Asian entrepreneurs to raise capital, grow their businesses and exit. we only do tech deals, but of course within that have covered anything from e-commerce, fintech, supply chain, logistics, and IoT. And in terms of Hong Kong, I love going there for shopping and also the congee, and very desperately miss being able to hang out with all my good friends up north.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, thanks so much, Chris, and Paul Dreg. It's your turn.
Thanks, Drew. Chris, you're missing some good bargains at the moment. It's not a bad time to be shopping here in Hong Kong, I can tell you. So I'm a partner in the corporate department of Tanner DeWitt. Tanner DeWitt is an established independent law firm in Hong Kong. The area that I focus is specifically on the technology sector, covering all manner and range of work, but primarily corporate work around M&A, capital raising, and other regulatory issues around fintech businesses. But I cover technology in all its different verticals. So looking forward to the discussion in the course of the rest of this panel. Drew, back to you.
Okay, well, thanks everyone, and let's get ready to rumble. First question, and again, just we'll do it fairly free form for most of these topics. Which business sectors have you found to be particularly resilient in 2020, and which sectors do you view as being hot in 2021?
Hi, Drew. I'm happy to maybe start on that and just start the ball rolling. In the past year, what I found surprising is that even though it's kind of been a bumpy year in some ways, if you look at the year in total, it's been an incredibly busy year for us overall. We haven't seen any particular reduction in deals. So probably one characteristic is that the deals have been smaller in size, but maybe more in number. If that is a trend, that may be the more sizable deals being more complicated or a bit more difficult to get off the ground. But in terms of areas that we've seen an awful lot of activity, I would look at logistics in particular. We've seen a very significant growth in the number of capital raising, general work, and one exit in respect of the logistics sector and supply chain generally. Surprisingly also, well, maybe not surprisingly, but we've also been quite active in InsurTech and in that particular space, maybe just as a bellwether or as an emblem of fintech activity. But for us, InsurTech has been an area of activity for us in the past year.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Thanks, Padraig.
Yeah, thank
Drew,
you,
I'm
Padre.
happy to add to that, Drew. I would pick up on what Padre was saying, that I think what we're seeing is a very active capital market. When COVID had kicked in March, lockdowns were imposed globally. I think a lot of us didn't know what the markets were going to hold, but I think it's fairly safe to say that the equity capital markets have been extremely resilient, particularly in healthcare, technology. SaaS-based companies are doing extremely well, raising a significant amount of capital. You're seeing mining had a bit of a resurgence in the second quarter of this year, in particular gold companies. So you saw a lot of gold companies accessing the capital markets. You saw a lot of M&A in consolidation in the mining sector. So I think it's going to be really interesting what 2021 is going to hold. If you look at where the market was at the end of October and to where the market is today, like there are some stocks that are effectively up almost 30% to 35% in such a short period of time. Partially, you can attribute that to the vaccinations and the positive news which has been received globally about that. So I actually think 2021 is going to be a very bullish year in a start, hopefully, of a significant bull run.
Okay, great.
From a Southeast Asian perspective, it's perhaps a little bit different. You know, unlike Hong Kong and China, which is obviously one landmass and relatively free flowing, you know, Singapore is quite reliant on being the hub where all the investment flows go to. And of course, the key markets here are Indonesia and Vietnam. And without the ability to travel and do your on-presence due diligence to write that investment check, it's only the larger deals and the residual deals where people were already in train for due diligence, etc., that were getting done this year. Having said that, the overall trend is just pure digital acceleration, right? I mean, who would have imagined a world where universally the offline channels were just shut and all of a sudden the online channels were strong? And so, of course, what we've seen is operationally, e-commerce, logistics, payments, all come on stronger, health tech, etc. And so the investor appetite for looking at the sector and the performance of these target companies is better. And should the travel open up, what we are looking at is a resurgence in the deal making if people can actually travel and do due diligence on these companies.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris.
Maybe finish up on the subject, Drew, particularly in my practice, to give you a very specific example. The food industry has been particularly resilient. Things there's a resurgence in the food industry. Everyone is at top capacity, especially in food transformation. One of the trends globally now is to buy local. And some of the companies that I've seen out there, some of the transactions that have happened are international company buying local companies in order to take advantage of this trend in each country. Particular example, for example, I think we have a couple of people from Germany on the call. There's a transaction ongoing right now, the Oetker Group company buying a beverage distribution company called Flaschenpost in Germany. And it's a perfect example of having a traditional food and beverage company buying a company that is actually losing money and paying over 3 times revenue, I believe, for Flaschenpost in order to increase their possibility of distributing locally beverages in the German market. So it's a trend I'm seeing everywhere, and I'm especially happy to see that this is going to happen. I think Hong Kong and Canada, North America in general, will see a lot of these transactions with people that or companies that want to take some local companies and take advantage of this trend.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. And speaking of resilience, the Hong Kong exchange, that's fared quite well during the pandemic. And I'd just be curious to hear anyone's thoughts that have had experience in terms of listings, capital raises this year. And in particular, is there an opportunity for North American firms to participate on the HK exchange?
So maybe I'll start, Drew. I think you're absolutely right. About 3 years ago, the Hong Kong Exchange had initiated some new listing rules called the Chapter 18A listing rules as part of an effort to promote new economy companies. So they effectively took away their listing requirements for profitability, and that sector and the companies that have listed under Chapter 18 have increased. I think to date, there's been almost 53 billion in Hong Kong dollars and 21 companies that have listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange under Chapter 18A. Given COVID, you've seen more of more companies coming from pharmaceutical, medical devices, and medical technology. So I think the Hong Kong Exchange has proven that it is, in some ways, I think for companies that have kind of a China or Asia-facing technology in those sectors, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange will continue to remain an international capital market that will, in some ways, be equivalent, if not at least probably equivalent to what NASDAQ is for biotech companies in North America. So I think for Canadian companies that are looking, that have technology that's facing Asia and they're looking to grow in that market, and that's a big part of their underlying demographic of which they're targeting in their market, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange will be a great market, not dissimilar how it has been for other Canadian and international companies that have elected to list in Hong Kong because of the connectivity to liquidity within the region. I mean, it is unparalleled in many ways as an international capital market within Asia to date.
Thanks, Raj. Anyone else? Or if not, next up is something that has been a bit of a challenge for cross-border M&A transactions, namely the trade tensions between China, the United States, and Canada. And I'd be eager to hear the panel's perceptions as to how these trade tensions have impacted your business or that of your clients.
One of the things, Drew, that I've come across in terms of speaking to clients in relation to this topic, and actually other legal professionals in North America also, is that if you look at the, what is happening on the ground in terms of, manufacturing and other supply chains that lead from China to the US, or even distribution that goes in the other direction, the economies at an operating level are so closely intertwined that yes, trade tensions make life difficult, particularly in respect of specific industries at specific times. But it's not necessarily. It hasn't come up in a situation where clients are saying, we need to pull out of our business operations, or we're changing our Asia plan or our Greater China plan by reason of these trade tensions. So there's something that's happening at government level, which is part of a broader geopolitical issues that are going on, but at an underlying trade level, it hasn't substantially disrupted, caused mass disruption across a broad range of industries. It's been much more specific in terms of its impact since then. So that's my, what we can hope to aspire to is that, with a change of command in the US in particular, that not necessarily that the stance may differ, but there may be a bit more diplomacy about how communications are conducted at an international level, and that may help support stabilizing some of those tensions even at a trade level. Those would be my views in terms of the feedback I've been getting from clients.
I might follow up on Padraig's comments. I mean, the reality is that we're so interconnected globally, and if you look at RCEP, you either join it or you basically miss out. And what we see is that there is a sector by sector difference in terms of how have these trade and geopolitical tensions play out. For Southeast Asia, it's just been a net benefit. We see Vietnam obviously being a supply chain and manufacturing alternate. And 10 years ago, you talk about Vietnam being the place where you get shoes and t-shirts done. Now you're talking about mobile phones, Japanese cars, LCD screens. It's completely different. And then looking at other big consumer markets. And of course, that's the other Southeast Asian story, which is Indonesia, which is democracy of 300 million. It will be the largest middle class outside of China and India that's emerging. And the trade tensions with the RCEP has absolutely been a lift for the Southeast Asian investor interest.
Thanks, Chris. Does anyone else have any perspectives?
Well, maybe just a quick comment. Thanks, Chris and Padraig, for the 35,000-foot view. Down on the ground, the perception of Canadians in particular, North Americans, but Canadian in particular, in my experience with Asia, has been nothing but positive, and it hasn't changed within 2020. So I think everyone on the call right now is probably aware of this, but doing business in Asia involves developing personal relationships, and therefore meeting people face to face and traveling. One of the things that has impeded some of the transactions or cross-border discussions is the ban on travel. And the simple fact that we cannot have those relationships or meet the people and sit down with them and have the discussions has tremendously affected the ability to do some cross-border transactions in 2020. I'm hoping that with the talk of vaccine and perhaps the lifting of the travel ban, there will be a possibility of us traveling again and a resurgence of cross-border transactions.
Yeah, and I would just add, Drew, just to pick up on an earlier point that Chris raised, that you're not seeing the very large-scale cross-border M&A from Asia into Canada, just for the reasons that Eric has mentioned. I do think that with the trade tensions between the US and China, that still remains an opportunity for Canada to position itself, as it always has, very well in a neutral basis to facilitate capital flow and transactions to North America. I know we're going to talk about that later, but I think that it still remains an opportunity for Canada.
Okay, great. And following on, aside from the trade tensions, but really, touching on what some of you were saying with respect to the travel ban. I mean, have you any, for those deals that you have closed or even just maintaining client relationships? I mean, how are there any? How has it worked for you with basically having to do everything remote via Zoom or a similar type of communication platform in terms of your ability to identify targets, purchasers, investors, due diligence, obtain financing, that sort of thing?
So maybe I'll start. I think from my perspective, what it has meant is that you're almost looking to your existing network of relationships, because you haven't had the opportunity, as Eric said, to continue to foster those personal relationships on the ground with colleagues in Asia, which is such an important component of the business culture there. So I have found that what it has meant is kind of just looking at my database of networks and trying to have some touching points with them. Zoom calls, a number of we've done. I have a group out of Singapore I work with, and we do monthly Zoom calls just to keep in touch, talk about what's happening. But I would say that ultimately, nothing is going to replace the ability to sit in front of people, develop a personal relationship. So I think this year in some way has been a transition for those of us that have strong networks in Asia. We've leveraged it, but at some point you're going to have to kind of renew those networks. And that means having to be there physically, developing those relationships and looking at opportunities, because that will accelerate deal flow and business that will flow from that.
Okay, thanks, Raj.
The plus side, though, is that it has shown that the adoption of digital tools, particularly within the work that I do within the legal profession, which tends to be quite conservative and slow in respect of the uptake in technology, but it's been significant in a way where you would expect it to be, to have legs beyond the resolution of travel restrictions and COVID-19 generally. It has opened a vista of another way of, if not necessarily replacing how business has been done, supplementing, making it more efficient, opening up different ways in which communication can occur. And that has certainly been beneficial. One of the things that we've seen in respect of due diligence exercises, and there are risks inherent, and it may be something that will, the consequences might flow through later on when you get into warranty periods, and that is a lot of the diligence has been a document-only due diligence through data rooms and so forth. And oftentimes, particularly on larger deals, the ability to actually go to the premises of the target, to visit and directly speak to and interview the senior management there, and those kinds of things from a physical due diligence, even on the legal side, the absence of being able to do so, there may be issues that will come to roost as a result of that. Most of the due diligence we've been done has been done on a document only via data room basis, which has its limitations.
Okay, thanks, Padraig. Anyone else?
I was just going to say, in a sense, it's brought us closer together. The whether or not your partner is in the next city or a few kilometers away, or he's in Hong Kong. We're all doing these Zoom calls now. So we've all tried to keep in contact with our networks, as Raj and Padraig were saying, and you know, we're all in this boat together, and you know, these calls that we're doing on Zoom now, as I mentioned, they're the same whether I'm talking to someone in Hong Kong or in Montreal.
Well, you know, Drew, I'm not surprised that Eric is saying that it's brought us all close together, because, of course, Eric is a great guy and, you know, he will always have friends. What I see in the market is potentially two things, which is not so good. The reality is this: people are getting fatigued of Zoom. People are getting fatigued of webinar. You know, it was all good and people were talking about the end of travel. And we've seen throughout the year just, you know, webinar attendance and sort of Zoom attendance decline. In addition, what we've also seen is the capacity in terms of travel and hospitality. It's just going to get more expensive, and it's going to be harder to justify, because everyone's going to look at that expense item and say, do you really have to travel anymore? And that's a shame. So what's going to happen is the people that have strong networks, that have built strong networks, can keep those networks going. They will be rewarded for that longer term investment, right? And the people with the local networks, they will be rewarded for that localization. Because sadly, I don't see the digital bridging the gap. And even if the vaccine does come out, it's going to take a while to deploy, and the travel capacity and the cost of travel to actually go down to, you know, where it was used to, which you know, we took for granted declining travel costs for the last couple of decades.
Okay. Oh, very interesting, Chris. Thanks for that. And actually, I'll just follow up with, I'm curious for each of you, you know, whether it be those located in Canada, Raj and Eric, or even Padraig and Chris, who I don't know how much you travel to North America, but even within Southeast Asia. I mean, let's say that vaccine will be rolled out in a few months, things get back to normal. Once things get back to normal, I mean, do you anticipate ramping up your travel to where it was, or do you think it just you'll never attain that volume or frequency of trips?
Maybe I'll start. I do envision that, Drew, that I will, and continue to invest my time in building relationships, because it's such an important component to be there personally. Although with technology, I think what I would do is alter how I work. And so in other words, I don't think because of, you know, what's happened with COVID, I may not need to go to the office every day. I think a lot of us have that recognition that we're just as efficient working remotely from our house that we may be in the office. And so from that perspective, you know, my local travel actually may go down, but I don't see the international travel being impacted at all from my perspective.
Yeah, quickly, I agree with Chris was saying previously, but you're right, Raj. I think our international travel will ramp up to where it was before, but I will say that I don't think Raj and myself are a good example of what international traveling will be in particular. The reason is that we've both of us have been traveling up to 10 times a year to the Asian region, so we are perhaps very frequent travelers. The general population, I think, I echo what Chris said, is going to go down in their travel expenditures. Companies will bring it down, and also office space, to mention something about that. I don't think being in the office space industry right now is such a great place to be. Everyone is paring things down. Large corporations are putting in programs while confinement is still happening, asking their employees if they're willing to do work from home, and also asking for percentage of time that people think they will be spending in their offices, meaning that all of the office space is going to be reduced.
Which is actually not good news, because one of the things that we're seeing, which is quite sad, is of course, you know, depending on the study you read, this year has been an acceleration of digital transformation, whether, you know, you talk about 5 or 10 years being compressed into one, or whatever the relevant stat. And across the world, one of the big ones is automation and automation of humans. And if we look at where humans need to compete with robots and software, effectively, one of the key components that humans can do, which robots can't, is be creative, cooperate, all the things that need humans to meet and trust to create and do everything that robots can't. So this is going to be an issue that we're going to have to tackle. And unfortunately, this year has been a coalescing of COVID, economic, geopolitical issues. And whilst we might solve the COVID issues, some of those other issues are going to remain and be tougher. So 21 might actually be tougher than 20.
Okay, Padraig, how do you see things?
Well, I just know that I need to have authentic laksa in Singapore on at least a quarterly basis. So I think travel is definitely going to be coming back. What you might find is maybe, and this feeds into some of the geopolitical issues we'll speak about later, is that it may be that where you travel becomes slightly different. It may be more regionalized than was the case before. That might be just a factor of just you travel where you think the business will be, and that is a changing picture.
Okay, and same here as well. Echoing the comments by Raj and Eric. I mean, once things ramp up, I plan to resume normal travel activities. Although I'm not looking forward to wearing a mask for 15 hours. Hopefully there's an alternative solution for those flights. But even if so, it's well worth the trip. I'm a big believer in the face-to-face. And next question I have for all of you is as we all know, everyone on the webinar is aware, Hong Kong has long been considered a portal for trade capital and financial activity between mainland China and North America. And I'd be curious to learn your views as to what extent, if any, do you believe the status will continue going forward or perhaps change somehow?
Well, I can kick off on that. I think one thing that you can say is that all the traditional values of Hong Kong as a business center very much continue to be there. Free movement of capital, rule of law, wealth of professionals who are able to support business, particularly around financing and particularly around the subject of today's panel, which is mergers and acquisitions and corporate finance. This is an international city that has got a long, long history in respect of that experience and that expertise. So there's nothing happening within Hong Kong that changes that economic, trade, and business outlook. To the extent that there may be changes going forward, that will be more because of other issues happening, in other facets of the world. But the reasons for using Hong Kong or structuring transactions or using Hong Kong as a hub for transactions, particularly if they're focused towards Greater China, all those reasons are still very, very compelling.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think as I was saying earlier, Hong Kong still will serve a very important function within Asia. It is the most dominant international capital market, and as a result, it has such a critical infrastructure around financial services. It's now attracting leading edge new economy companies, so it's diversifying its base of companies that are looking to access capital. So from my perspective, I think it'll continue to be a hub that's relevant. It's still the capital market for China, and as a result of that, there is a huge pool of liquidity which is in the system, which is therefore the opportunity for jurisdictions like Canada and Canadian companies and our clients to access that and do business there, so it's going to remain a hub for that.
Speak up, somebody.
Okay, if not, I'll actually pivot to one of the questions from our webinar attendees. To the extent any of you are able to answer this, I think it's a great question. To what extent do you envision the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, reshaping the cross-border relationship and M&A outlook in going forward in the next decade between the East and the West and within Asia itself?
So one of the things that I see with that, Drew, is this: it's one example of what you might say is a regionalization that's beginning to happen within the world. And let me explain, I'm coming at this somewhat from a technology viewpoint, that what you are seeing is that there are almost two global pillars, and there will be a geopolitical wellspring.
I think Padraig, we've temporarily lost you. Okay. Okay.
Sorry,
Padraig,
am I back online, Drew?
you are. Yeah. Would you mind repeating, please? Because
Okay. Sure. Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. Sorry, I was lost, but now I'm found, just like Amazing Grace. So what I was saying is if you look at a global trend, it is a global trend where you have two economic powers, and then alliances and allegiances supporting those particular powers. Now, RCEP is just really one of an example of that. You see that happening more and more within the technology sphere. So this is one of the things that you can see going forward, that in respect of developing areas and developing business opportunities, and you can link this directly into M&A activity, that a lot of that activity within Asia is going to be within Asia, not necessarily something that is as focused upon either North America or the EU as it has been in past years. That's just an example of the growing changes within the international environment that we're operating. It's a regionalization aligning itself to what are really now two separate global pillars.
Drew, you're muted.
Oh, thanks. Thank you very much, sir. I was saying thank you, Padraig. That was very much worth the wait. And my next question for everyone is, in your view, what is Canada's role to play in Hong Kong and Southeast Asia during 2021 and beyond?
Well, Drew, you and I met a couple of years ago, and probably 5 or 6, and together with Eric in Singapore. And we were delighted to meet you, because really the greater story of the majority of Asia is, we're absolutely open for business. It is a young population that isn't desktop first, but actually mobile first. It is leapfrogging in terms of economic development because of this technology, and it is open to do business. And a unique role of Canada is it's very much perceived as a very multinational, a very inclusive, and a very cooperative society, one that's easy to understand and trust. And so the brand Canada is quite strong, and there's a good role to play in the development with the capital deployment vis-a-vis the region. And so where you may or may not see other jurisdictions retreat, and when you look at Brexit in Europe and all sorts of things that are happening around the world, this is a good opportunity to step in and say, no, we still want to be part of the bigger picture. If anything, certainly from a Southeast Asian experience, you see ASEAN, go from strength to strength, cooperation just go from strength to strength, and just this real opportunity to create the new economy, and that window will close. The window will close when the capital need is not so great, and intra-region there's going to be more than enough capital, and there isn't a need for external capital. So the time is now.
Yeah, quickly, just to echo what Chris just said about our initial meeting. Thank you, Chris. I remember it well. But it's been repeated dozens and if not hundreds of times in my meetings with people in Hong Kong and Singapore and China and Malaysia and everywhere that we've traveled. There's a welcoming gesture of everyone when we go there as Canadians to sit down with them and meet them. In actual fact, one of the things that I tell several people about our travels to Asia and doing business in Asia is it's so significantly different, the culture between Asia, if you compare Asia to North America. It's very hard to get meetings with high-ranking officials here in North America, and in Asia, it's much easier for us coming from North America. I will also say that I get the distinct feeling from everyone that I speak to in Asia that Canada is a perfect entryway into North America. Less and less of the people want to deal with the US, unfortunately, for numerous reasons, and they see Canada as a point of entry into North America and a much easier way to do business with companies based in Canada or the US for that matter.
Yeah, I would echo all those comments, Drew. I think we as Canadians are very well positioned to navigate the geopolitical tensions which have existed between Asia and the US. And to Eric's point, Canada is seen as an alternative, a user-friendly jurisdiction, an investment-friendly jurisdiction for cross-border M&A. So I think we're going to continue to remain a beneficiary of that. And it's also, certainly from what I've seen in the capital markets, it's also an entry strategy for Asian companies that are looking to access the US domestic market. They rather access it through Canada.
One of the things you see time and time again within the business community here in Hong Kong is the strong ties between Hong Kong itself and Canada. So there are so many people, senior business people, who have either been educated in Canada, have lived in Canada for a period of time, and they've brought back that, for a start, affinity, but also deeper than that, awareness and knowledge of the system, of the economy, of how do you conduct business and the opportunities that there are in Canada. There's a much deeper awareness of that in the Hong Kong business community than would be the case for many places throughout the world. So that's another strong reason why you can always see that Canada will have a warm reception in this part of the world.
Okay, that's great to hear. Thanks, Paul Drake. And turning the tables to Hong Kong, the next question is, now that the turmoil from the domestic issues experienced during the past several years is largely behind everyone, what is your outlook like for the business climate for Hong Kong in 2021? Why is Hong Kong still very much in the game?
Well, looking at it from my perspective, it's actually for the same reasons why Hong Kong has always been in the game. It's a very active financial services center and will always likely to be so. It's also endlessly creative in how it positions itself and responds to what is happening in terms of the economy and the world around it. So you can see that happening even now in respect of the greater support for diversifying the economy within Hong Kong, but also in terms of diversifying the businesses it attracts for listing in the capital markets. Going forward, you can see that the relationships will change, that there will be a closer focus on stronger and deeper integration with mainland China, but there are enormous opportunities within that. It is just a deepening of the role of that Hong Kong has taken on as being a valve between investment into and out from mainland China. So you know, there are many reasons to be positive going forward.
Yeah, I would add to what Padre has said. You know, I think that the reasons which have certainly made us as a firm gravitate towards Hong Kong, at least for the medium term, they're going to continue to remain very relevant. It's a hub for us. It's a critical market access point for international capital in Asia. It is a hub for Canadian companies and other international companies looking for a platform to grow within the region. It has viable international infrastructure that's user-friendly, business-friendly. So I don't see that changing.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, we're always looking for partners to provide capital. There's been a tightening of the rules here in terms of lending out money and looking at deals. There was actually a bit of a hiatus on lending, in particular from traditional lenders, between about March and November. It's loosened a little bit now, but it's still not very easy to get some mandates done. So Hong Kong's always been a great source of capital. It will remain a great source of capital. And furthermore, in the future, if these rules do not loosen, it makes even more sense to try and do some transactions with our Asian partners.
Okay, thanks, Eric. And just at this point, I'd like to, being mindful of time, let our webinar participants know that because we started, it is the top of the hour, depending on where you're listening. And because we started about 5 minutes late, we will continue for about another 5 minutes or so. If you can't stay due to another commitment, I also wanted to let you know that a recording of this webinar will be made available. So have just a few more questions for everyone. And actually, it's the next question is from one of our panelists, from one of our webinar attendees. What do you think are the greatest risks with international M&A between Asia and US Canada?
Certainly in technology, Drew, it's going to take a while to navigate the issues around who writes the rules on 5G, who writes the rules on data, who writes the rules on the new economy. That is just not going to be easy. So I can't imagine that international M&A, when it comes to those specific semiconductors, I mean, I just do not see that resolve itself in the next 5 or even 10 years.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Chris.
Probably anything that tips things into the political domain. If there's something maybe around merger control or national security issues that are in some way linked to what's at the root of the acquisition, that would be a significant, maybe even an insurmountable risk, and is one of the reasons why some deals might just not progress and be pulled out of. Apart from that, there's risk in every kind of international M&A. So there wouldn't necessarily be something outstandingly unique about international M&A as between Asia, which is quite a big region, and North America. There's risk inherent in every transaction.
Yeah, I would add to that the simple fact that we can't, or it's very limited in terms of due diligence, physical due diligence that we can do with some companies. I think there's certainly a trend towards an increase in fraud, and this would be inbound transactions into China, for example. Whenever some of the rules are not possible, such as actual physical due diligence and visit of sites, there is a bit of an increase. So to address the question directly, I think one of the biggest threats is that we can't do physical diligence, or at least not as much as we could before.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Thanks for that, Eric. And actually, again, being mindful of time, I'll just I'm going to wrap things up with asking each one of our panelists to provide their roughly 60 seconds or so, any concluding observations or comments. So, Eric, I'll ask you to go first, please.
Yes, thank you, Drew. Again, thanks to the HKCBA for having us today, and very interesting discussion with my fellow panelists. As you guys have probably guessed, we all know each other from our travels, and it's good to get together with everyone today. Just wanted to say that with renewed acceptance of international travel in 2021, and again with the coming of the vaccine, although it might take a while for everyone to get vaccinated, we're also talking about possible stamps in our passports to allow people to travel to different regions, which I think is a welcome rule. And I'm certainly sure that in Asia it will be something that we'll need to do. But I think the transactions will increase in 2021. My experience is 2020 has slowed down quite a bit. Some of the panelists have said that the activity has continued to be present, but certainly the length of time to take to get some transactions to be concluded has been extended quite a bit for me personally in 2020. So I'm hoping that 2021 will bring that down, and again that we'll be able to travel again so that we can start getting some transactions done. In terms of industries, as I said before, I'm very bullish on the food industry. Very traditional businesses. I'm getting lots of requests from private equity firms, venture capitalists, and corporations in general asking for some opportunities in mostly traditional businesses, and in particular in the food industry. So that's what I'm seeing for 2021.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Raj, I'd love to hear your thoughts, please.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. First of all, Drew, for organizing this panel, and the HKCBA for hosting us. As I mentioned, I think Hong Kong is going to remain a very vital ecosystem for transactional and international work between North America and Asia, in and outbound. I think healthcare, as I mentioned, is going to be a very relevant sector, and certainly COVID has brought that to the forefront this year. Capital markets there remain very vibrant for that sector, and therefore I think for Canadian companies that fit a certain profile, there are some real opportunities to raise meaningful amounts of capital and grow their business where they have kind of an outward facing kind of Asia solution.
Okay, thank you, Raj. Chris, your thoughts, please.
So thank you again, Drew, for having me, and thank you, HKCBA, for hosting. My overall message is come to Asia, and in particular, come down to Singapore. We have 700 million people here. The average age is 31 years old, and everyone is going online. There are amazing opportunities in e-commerce, fintech, logistics, healthcare, education, where certainly Canadian capital can make a disproportionate impact. And so, have a look, check it out. If you can't hop on a plane, give us a call, get on a Zoom.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Chris. And Podrick, our man in Hong Kong.
Yes, well, I guess in terms of concluding comments, and I'm aware that there's a broad audience that is participating this evening. One of the things that I would like to draw as a contrast is the contrast between a perception that may be developing of Hong Kong internationally that is quite different to what's happening on the ground. There are changes both in respect of the political sphere and in respect of the some areas around national security, but in respect of what is happening on the ground in respect of trade, commerce, business activity, M&A activity, finance, in 95% or more of the economy, it is exactly the same reasons now as has always been a positive and good and a compelling reason why you would look to Hong Kong as being a hub for particular kinds of activities around capital raising, around deal flow and deal activity across all spheres of the economy. And that is unlikely to change. I think what will change is that Hong Kong will be finding a new way of putting itself in the middle of different kinds of activity because of changes in the global stage. Some of that might be a regionalization of M&A activity as more and more deals happen at a regional level or even at a local level. And some of that will still be, of course, the international M&A for which Hong Kong has always been a focal point as being in respect of the Asian side of that equation. So, you know, Hong Kong has got a very interesting, changing future in front of it. But if there is one thing that you can tell from past performance, and like the stock markets, that it will be an indicator for future performance.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Padraig. And that concludes our webinar for today. And again, I'd like to extend a once again a particular thanks to the HKCBA for hosting, making this all possible, to our kind sponsors, Macmillan, Tanner DeWitt, and Hong Kong Economic Trade Office, and as well as to our esteemed panelists, Eric Cardinal, Raj Dewan, Chris Tran, and Padraig Walsh. They each of the four of them they represent some of the finest professionals I know on both sides of the Pacific. So again, I heartily encourage any of the webinar attendees to look them up, consult them if you need their services. And again, I'd like to thank everyone for listening, and be well. Happy holidays.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.